All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit more about Rate Saver. This product is SolarEdge's consumption-only battery, and what we really want to highlight today is the talking points, where this product makes sense, and kind of what the advantages are over using a traditional battery backup solution. Um, so, our agenda today, we're going to discuss the use cases for Rate Saver, the benefits versus backup solutions. We'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk how to discuss Rate Saver with homeowners, and we've got a sample talk track that we're going to role play through. So you can kind of see this conversation in action as well. And of course, at the end, we want to make sure that we answer all of those questions that you had throughout the presentation. So we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end as well. Well, first place we want to start is where Rate Saver makes sense and how this product actually works. For that, I think I'm going to turn this over to you, Michelle.
Sure. And I think that, we originally came out with this product in California for NEM3 because essentially I like to say you want to touch the grid as little as possible. You want to send as little energy back and take as little energy from the grid as possible. And so what we're seeing, though, is that this product is really popular in other areas now: Arizona, Texas, Michigan, Illinois, places where the utility is no longer giving advantageous rates for your electricity that you're sending back to them. And so I think what's really important is to simplify this product. It can get into the weeds a little bit too much because we're all so used to selling backup. So what's the first thing that you talk to homeowners about when you're talking about batteries in general? Well, what do you want to back up in your house? This product, you don't have to have that conversation. So it's a little bit of an adjustment, and that's what we want to talk about today. So just to reiterate, we have 3 different products that you can really sell to your homeowners. I want to mention that the battery itself is the same exact battery in these situations. It's just the configuration that's going to be different. So if we look on the right-hand side, you're going to see that we have full home backup capabilities. You can actually have up to 9 batteries on a house if you needed it. 3 batteries per inverter. So those are for those homeowners that really need substantial backup. They want to back up their whole house. They don't want to change their lifestyle, even if there's an outage situation. And then probably the most popular in terms of backup is that essential home backup, 1 or 2 battery systems, where we're backing up those essential loads, the things that we really have to have on in an outage. 2 backup batteries has been kind of a comfy spot because it's going to provide 20 kilowatt hours of capacity. It allows that homeowner to back up some of those heavier loads. And so that's been kind of a great option for backup capabilities. But then we have this Rate Saver. So if you notice, there's one box that's missing within this configuration, and it's that backup interface. So that backup interface is what disconnects the home from the grid, and that's what allows for backup capabilities. So Rate Saver doesn't have that because we're not using it for backup. We're using it for a bucket to store energy. So how do we explain that to a homeowner is the challenging part, right? Let's simplify it. You want to become your own power plant. Mr. Homeowner, this allows you to become your own power plant. You can actually run your home on solar during the day and store a little bit of that energy that you're not using so that when you have those high peak rates during the day, during those time of use rates, we can actually transition your home to use that stored energy. And then we're going to power your home on stored energy throughout the night. And then we start all over again in the morning. So if you notice, and I like to say, we're touching the grid as little as possible. We're sending as little back possible, and we're taking as little from the grid as we can. And so that allows your homeowner to feel empowered that they're essentially becoming their own power plant and using that battery for their own consumption. But why, if we're selling a battery, right, why is it that we would want to not set it up for backup? Well, here's a fun fact. The most expensive part of a battery installation is setting it up for backup. Because that requires you to relocate loads into a backup subpanel or to wire directly into that main service panel so that you can back up those loads. It requires another box, which is that backup interface. And it requires substantially higher labor costs because you have an electrician on site that has to do this work. And so this is allowing, if we're doing Rate Saver, it's allowing you to have the most cost-effective option possible in these markets that have less advantageous net metering policies. So why would that homeowner want to send energy back to the grid if they're not making the same one-to-one rate as they're paying, right? And that's why we would be doing something like this. We're storing the energy instead. And so it's a better payback for the homeowner, and it allows less installation requirements, less materials, and less labor. So better cost. Okay, I think Ash, this is your side, Rate Saver versus backup. I think you have a good analogy for this this concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we dive into this, Michelle, I wanted to get ahead of, in the sales conversation, you said that we start talking about backup right away, typically, when we start off the conversation about batteries. But I think that we do that a lot in a lot of cases because that's where the customer's mind is usually at too when we're talking about storage. When we start bringing up that storage conversation, in a lot of cases, homeowners, they're going to think about battery backup. They're going to think about sustaining their home. So when a homeowner doesn't need that, when they've got really no pain around outages, how do we talk to them in a way that they can understand about that product, that self-consumption product, that rate saver product? And here's an analogy I thought was really, really useful for me. When you talk to a customer initially, they're thinking of storing their energy, and it's kind of like a savings account strategy when we're talking about just purely battery backup. Because what a lot of customers are seeing that battery as is kind of a savings account where they can store their energy, and then they're only going to be using that stored energy for emergency situations typically. And that's what's going to be at the forefront of their mind, is using that battery as kind of their savings account. But we know that that's going to come along with higher monthly payments as well. As Michelle had talked about, when we are doing a battery backup system, if that homeowner's got no pain points around outages, that's just going to drive their monthly costs up by making that installation more expensive. But when we're talking about using a battery for self-consumption, and by the way, even if the homeowner has a battery backup system, they can still use this strategy as well. It's not one or the other. But when we're discussing pure self-consumption systems like Rate Saver, purely what we're doing there is having a solar investment strategy. So Rate Saver is more like a strategic investment. We're making sure that we have really low startup costs. We're saving them some money on that installation at the very front to bring those monthly costs down. What that means, what they're going to use this battery for on a daily basis, it's like a really good player at the stock market. They're going to be buying that energy when their rates are low and running their home both on the grid when the rates are low and on solar when their solar is generating. But the real magic is selling that energy when rates are high. And there's two different ways that a homeowner is going to interact with this. They're going to get maximum benefit, number one, by discharging the energy from that battery when their electricity rates are the most expensive. That way they're avoiding paying for the times when their electricity is going to cost them the most. But there's actually another benefit as well. When we look into a lot of these utility programs that are starting to de-incentivize net metering, what we see typically is there's some period of the year or maybe even a period of the week where it's really beneficial to provide energy to the grid, and they're offering a high payback for that energy. The good news here is with SolarEdge's Rate Saver and the programming on the battery, we can actually send energy back to the grid during those high payback periods. So we're getting maximum value out of that energy that we're generating. So to recap, when we're coming into a conversation with a homeowner, in a lot of cases, they're going to be centered around that savings account strategy. They're going to be like, hey, I want to save this energy and use it during emergencies. When we're talking to them about self-consumption, we've got to sell them on, hey, we're using this battery more as a solar investment strategy to get you maximum value out of the energy that you're generating on your roof. Because when we talked about it, you said, hey, those emergency situations, they don't happen that frequently. So we don't want to spend a bunch of extra money to prepare for those. Now, the great news here is that no matter what setup of battery a homeowner's getting, whether they're doing a full home backup system or they're doing SolarEdge Rate Saver, they still get all of the strengths that are associated with that SolarEdge home battery. That includes the really high efficiency by minimizing conversions of energy. We're a DC coupled battery, so our energy is largely raw and unfiltered. The battery sits before the inverter on the line. The only time we're converting from DC to AC is at the inverter itself. When we're looking by contrast at other system setups that have an AC coupled battery, microinverters is the example here, but there are other examples of AC coupled systems. You're converting energy 3 separate times between the roof and the home, and you lose a little bit of that energy at every single transition. So that can amount to huge losses, not only on an annual, but when you're looking at the lifetime of the system, you're losing out on energy every single day when you're doing those triple conversions. We call it a triple conversion tax. That can be as much as 10% more power just by choosing SolarEdge. One of the other unique features is the ability that the flexibility it gives you in the design of your system. With the SolarEdge home battery, you can actually oversize our inverter's rating by up to 200%. So what that means and how you can kind of apply that is if you're looking at our 7.6 inverter, that sits on a 40 amp breaker. That means your maximum system size for a 40 amp breaker, you've got the flexibility to go all the way up to 15.2 kilowatt on that 40 amp breaker. And that's a huge system on a 40 amp breaker. Now, a lot of you that are industry professionals might be thinking to yourselves right now, why would I ever want to do that? If I'm putting that large of a system on that size inverter, that's just going to turn into a bunch of clipping and a bunch of wasted energy. The good news here is since our battery sits on the DC side of the line, we've got a little bit more flexibility in what happens if the inverter was going to clip energy. Instead of that energy being clipped and lost, we can actually send that back to the battery and use it to charge the battery. And that just feeds right back into that strategy of being able to buy low when your system's really kicking and overproducing, and then use that energy at times when we can sell it high.
Yeah, speaking of the buy low, sell high, another situation where this is happening, and we didn't even really touch on it, is BPP scenarios. And we're seeing a lot more of those coming into markets. You know, I think of one in Texas, Octopus Energy has a good one right now, where essentially, you know, they're utilizing those home batteries to discharge during high demand times to offset the you know, community's energy use, and then they're paying that homeowner for that discharge. Same situation there is like with this rate saver, you can do that as well. Use that as a bucket to work in BPP programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And those programs, the ones I've seen, the pay that they're giving you is pretty beneficial. So great call
It's
out.
usually like right up front. Yeah. Okay, so again, we are used to talking about backup and what homeowners want to back up in their home when we talk about batteries. So this is a little bit of a mindset shift to get used to. So let's talk about that rate saver conversation and when we potentially will be talking about rate saver versus backup and how to decide that. So you'll notice that there's really 2 types of homeowners that you're going to run into. And good news is this is kind of the same as it's always been, right? So we've talked about solar only customers, people that don't need batteries, and then people that do need batteries because of outages. That was kind of the old school way we would be looking at homeowners. Now it's kind of, okay, we have those same homeowners that have power outages and really need that peace of mind. And then we have homeowners that are going to be utilizing the batteries for no backup, and they're really focusing on bill savings. And that is kind of our standard solar only customer, the customer that only wants those bill savings and doesn't really have a risk of outages. So how do we determine which customer we're speaking with? I think that we all know it's what questions we ask, right? Which questions are we going to ask these homeowners to determine this? So we want to paint that picture with the homeowner. Tell me about the last time you were in a blackout. How long did it last? What's the longest blackout you've experienced? What was most uncomfortable? This will allow them to work through what happened last time so that they can build a list of things that they have to back up. One of my favorite questions too is if this homeowner does have challenges with blackouts, what's your plan for the next blackout? And that's usually the one I like to end with, because a lot of times what's that homeowner going to say? Well, we're going to sit in the dark again. Flashlights. I don't know. We got a couple more flashlights since the last blackout. And so this allows them to really talk themselves into, okay, I need a battery for my house for peace of mind because of these outages. But okay, what if you ask the homeowner, think about the last time you were in a blackout, how long did it last? And that homeowner says, I've lived in this house for 10 years and I've never had an outage. That's the kind of situation where, okay, we're not even going to talk about backup, right? We're going to talk about the rate saver, becoming your own power plant, touching the grid as little as possible, storing your energy during the day and utilizing it at night. That's when we're going to bring up that rate saver solution.
Yeah, and one thing I love about this, Michelle, is that when you're asking these discovery questions, sometimes the answers may not be incredibly straightforward. You may have that customer that's like, well, I haven't seen any blackouts recently, but 3 years ago I had one and it was really bad. But with Rate Saver, the good news is it's not an either or scenario. They can always get started with Rate Saver, and then if they start seeing those painful blackouts again, they can actually add that backup interface later on down the line in order to enable backup power for that system.
Right, because remember, it is the same battery as we would be using for backup. It's just that backup interface that we would need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so to recap, why would we want to go rate saver? Why do homeowners want a battery without backup? It really boils down to a lower monthly payment for your homeowners. This is $3,500 in equipment and labor savings, but when we're actually factoring in the potential they're having with, capabilities on storing their energy and discharging it, they're going to be saving more. What we're seeing in these markets that have less advantageous net metering policies, they're saving more money by having a storage solution than not. So the better recommendation is to have that rate saver battery than to just go solar only. Because this is going to enable that homeowner to buy low and sell high with their energy. And as Ash mentioned, you can add the backup interface later if they needed that backup functionality.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to just quickly role play how one of these conversations may look with a homeowner. We'll be making this deck available to you. If you wanted to copy paste and just memorize this exact talk track, that's what it's here for. But how this conversation might go. So, Michelle, from what you told me, I think the best option for your situation would be adding a SolarEdge Rate Saver battery to your system. So when we're talking about Rate Saver, what you can think of it as is kind of your solar investment strategy, because what it's going to enable is the ability to buy your energy low when prices are low, usually in the morning time. You're going to be charging that battery to full, and then you're going to sell high because you're going to use that stored power to run your home either when rates are at their highest or by sending that energy to the grid when payback's most beneficial for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
Awesome. Well, the reason I'm making this recommendation, during our conversation, you told me that outages, you hadn't seen any recently. They weren't much of a concern for you. With RateSaver, in the event of an outage, I just want to reinforce you wouldn't have access to backup power. But since outages weren't a concern, I'm recommending RateSaver to save you on those installation costs and get you a lower monthly payment. If your situation does change, give me a call if those outages start to happen in the future, because we can always look at adding that backup interface to enable that backup power later on. But right now, I feel like RateSaver is the best solution for you based on your current situation. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, I mean, if that's going to save me money, I don't really think we need backup power right now because we haven't had outages. So, yeah, I think that basic storage solution makes sense.
Awesome. Well, let's take a look at the specifics and let's get you set up.
Great.
Oop. All right. Well, we wanted to reserve the end here to for any questions that this team may have. But while we do that, wanted to let you guys know we do have some new videos for the month up on our Sales Elite playlist. One of them is how to size RateSaver battery systems, because as we know, it's a completely different equation than sizing up a full home backup solution. And we also have a great video on RateSaver expectation setting. That's another talk track that you can use to set those really great expectations and get that customer set up for success. If you scan the QR code that's on screen right now, you'll be able to access that entire Sales Elite playlist on our YouTube.
Great. And I do want to talk briefly about just the biggest question I always get with RateSaver, which is how many batteries should I add to a system if it's a RateSaver solution? Because again, we're so used to talking about backup, the loads and all of that. And so when we don't have that situation, how many batteries are needed? And it really depends on the homeowner's consumption habits and if they are able to charge 1 or 2 batteries during the day to use at night. Also, system size. So a rule of thumb is kind of 8 to 10 kW, or above. A 2 battery system is typically advantageous. But think about this in terms of daily consumption habits. If that homeowner is working from home and they're using a lot of their energy during the day, and they might not be able to charge 2 batteries to use at night. Plus, it sounds like, based on their daily consumption, that it's kind of even between the day and the nighttime. But if it's standard, typically, is that most people are going to work, going to school during the day, they're coming home at 4 o'clock. I mean, heck, this is why utility companies are charging us most, right? Between the hours of 4 and 10 p.m. usually. And so if that's the case, if they're not using their energy during the day for the most part, and then they're coming home and using the bulk of their energy at nighttime, this is a good scenario for potentially 2 batteries, especially if they're looking for, over an 8 kW solar system, because that will allow them to run their home on solar, but also charge 2 batteries so that they're able to discharge both of those batteries during those high demand times when they really need it. And so that's just how to kind of look at it when you're talking about RateSaver. It's much more about daily consumption habits. And I would ask the homeowner or get their green button data on what their daily consumption actually is so you can really assess 1 or 2 batteries. Now, do you ever go further past 2 batteries? Not typically. That's when we kind of see that savings curve go down a little bit. We're seeing 1 or 2 batteries being the kind of the sweet spot. But that's really how you size those consumption batteries.
Yeah, and one thing I love that this audience can use as a tool is that with a SolarEdge login, you can use SolarEdge's designer for free. And we've got some basic consumption profiles set up in Designer, so you can choose from, hey, kids are gone and working from home. There's a couple of different standard consumption profiles that you can choose, and that can help you in sizing that system too, putting in that exact consumption data and pairing it with a profile.
Yeah, good thinking. All right, just checking the Q&A here real quick. It looks like Oh, it says, John says that the QR code's not working for him. Would you be able to put
Yep.
we'll put the link in the chat as well, just to
Yep.
make
Let me
sure.
stop sharing for just a moment, and I will grab that link for them real quick.
That'll be easier anyways.
Yep.
All right, gonna check the Q&A one more time. Anybody else have any questions or requests for us? Looks like we are good. Ash is going to put that chat in there. So next month for Sales Elite, we're going to be talking about our domestic manufacturing facilities, our quality discussion, give you some stats on our quality and reliability. And so a lot of times you can share those with homeowners to really make them feel good about the equipment that they are using. Thanks, Ash. Put that in the chat. Thanks, John, for flagging that. Really appreciate it. Okay, anything else from your end, Ash?
Nothing else from my end. Just hope we get out here. That Rate Saver is another tool in the belt to help you guys work with those with homeowners and get those deals signed.
All right, thanks. Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.